Hi everyone, and welcome to Lesson 9. And in Lesson 9 we're going to be learning when the right time is to be formal and when isn't the right time to be formal when coaching during a session. Now you're probably thinking, as a coach, you should be formal and professional at all times. And no, I disagree with that statement, and for that reason I have created this lesson so that you can find the balance and understand the difference between when to be formal and when not to be formal when coaching. Now, before we begin diving in of when to be formal and when not to be formal during coaching, I'd like you to see this diagram I created. Now, as you can see, at one end of the diagram is the formal side, and in the other end is the informal side. But right in the middle of the diagram is a balance between being a formal and informal coach. Now, that is the aim of this lesson, so that you can target and always hit that middle perfect spot when you're not too formal, but you're not informal at the same time. Now, what happens if you find this perfect balance during your session? Well, I'll tell you what happens. Your participants return to your session. Now, there's nothing better as a coach when you have the same participants returning to your session, because that shows that they enjoyed your first session and they're willing to come back to your second session. So stay tuned. We are now going to discover and find out when to be formal and when not to be as formal and more informal during your coaching session. Now, what exactly does being a formal coach mean? What are the characters, or what's the personality traits of a formal coach? Now, someone who's a formal coach is very strict. They're very uptight, they have this sense of dictatorship, and they're just trying to display themselves as an authoritative figure. Now, that's very good if you're trying to get a message across. However, it is very bad in the sense of it makes your participants or the people you're coaching feel afraid. They're not themselves. And if they're not themselves, they're going to feel very hesitant. And that means if they're hesitant, they're less likely to approach you to questions. Worst of all, they're less likely to come back to your session. Now, if I could pick one image that describes this, because you know how they say a picture says 1,000 words, if I can pick one image, it would be this picture. Look at him. He doesn't look happy at all. All right, so that's what I mean by being formal, being this authoritative figure that says, do this, do that. Now, let's look at the informal side. Now, let's look at the flip side and see, what does being an informal coach mean? Now, someone who's informal when coaching is much more friendlier, definitely easier to talk to, more flexible, but most importantly, the participants enjoy being around them. Now let's look at this image over here. During this stage of the session, of the coaching session, I was informal, and as you can see, the participants enjoyed being around me. They enjoyed my presence and my atmosphere, and most importantly, there was positive vibes going around. Now, how did I achieve that? Let's look at this image over here. Now, it's a picture of me playing basketball with the group of participants I had to coach. Now, you're probably thinking, why is he out there playing? Why isn't he coaching from the sideline? The reason why I did this is it was towards the end of the session, and I thought I'd jump in and have a go with the participants, just to have a laugh, to make it fun for them. I did it towards the end of the session because I wanted the participants walking out of the session with smiles on their face, happy, and developing a much more better atmosphere, because you always want to finish your coaching session on a positive note. That way they're more likely to return back to your session. Alright, so that is the reason why I was playing and engaging in basketball with the participants I was coaching. Now, let's look at when to be formal. So there are two instances where I believe a coach should be formal at all times. The first one is during their introduction. So at one point, a coach will give an introduction. Mostly it happens before the session begins, and they'll give an introduction about what they're going to do and a bit about themselves. During this time, you definitely must be formal, because if you're not formal, then your participants or whoever you are coaching, they're not going to take you seriously. And if they don't take you seriously from the start, then they won't take you seriously towards any part of the session. The second part where I think a coach should be formal at all times is when they're explaining something. So if they're explaining a set of rules, or if they're explaining how to perform a certain drill, activity or game, they should definitely be formal and ensure that all the participants are paying attention. Because if you're not formal during this time, your participants, they don't take you serious, they wander off, and when it comes time to perform the drill or activity, they have no clue what to do, because they thought that it was a funny environment, that we're having a laugh, and that it wasn't serious. Now let's look at times or instances when to be informal. Now, definitely towards the end of the session, I did mention it before in the video, but you definitely want to be informal towards the end of the session. Now, this is because your session is about to end and you want to make sure your participants leave with a smile on their face and in a good note. That way, they're more likely to return back to your session. So do what I did. Jump in the games and activities. Have fun. Do something to make the session finish on a good note. Now, another instance where I believe you should be informal is in between breaks. For example, water breaks or timeouts between sessions. Now, be informal in the way where ask the participants questions about themselves, or let them ask their questions about you. Ask them, how was your day today? What did you do before you came here, for example? Now, you want to do this because you want to establish a rapport between each participant. They're not just a number. You want to get to know them as a person. That way they feel like they're special and you have a much more friendly environment. So doing this would definitely increase your chance of them returning back to your session. So that concludes lesson 9, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions about this lesson or would like to ask me anything, please email me at emilcurry@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to respond to any questions you have.